Hello again, I hope you're all doing well. Today I have a bit of a different video once again. It has to do with gun control and subjects like that. You can imagine a lot of people over the years have asked me about whether guns are good or bad and should they be restricted more or less, and I've run into people from many different countries and they have all kinds of different perspectives, and the various countries have different laws. And they like sharing with me what those laws do or what they're supposed to do. But I'll just read a recent request from the channel. So this young writer asked me, would you consider doing a video discussing your opinion and ideas on the current atmosphere of gun control or debate, the NRA that's supposedly running out of funding, etc. I'm not asking you to get political, and I hope that it won't make you uncomfortable, but it would be understandable if you didn't want to. I'm a young man that's unsure of the future of firearms, and I'm just looking for some advice and wisdom. Thanks for all your content. So I thought, well, I'll take a few minutes and just make a quick video. I'll begin with something I watched maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe longer. It was on CNN. A commentator, quite an intelligent man and a learned man, was reviewing all the different countries, or many different countries, and he was quoting the incidences where firearms were being used to cause harm. And he made note several times, in fact that was the whole point of his presentation, that the United States had the highest incidence of firearms being used to cause harm. And that's my own terminology so that I avoid all kinds of other terminology. As I was watching this, I thought, well, the logic is unusual, because typically if you're comparing countries and the result of firearms or anything being used for one purpose or another in a country, ideally you would have countries that have the same laws. So comparing, let's say, places that are free with places that are not free, and then saying that the places that are not free have higher incidences or lower incidences of whatever, really is a useless observation if you think about it. It might be useful, actually it'd be quite interesting if you could find another country like the United States, which you can't, because you may find places that have similar or even more free gun laws, but then you have less people and there are ethnic and cultural differences and so on. So this is strictly hypothetical, but if you did have another country like the United States with similar rights and freedoms, and one country had a lot of firearms and a lot of harm being caused by firearms, and the near identical other country had almost no incidences of firearms being used for harmful purposes, that would be an interesting study. But if you think about that one, if you pause and think about it, you probably wouldn't be studying firearms at all. You would probably be wondering, what is it about one country that's free where the people don't use firearms to cause harm, and in the other country they do cause harm? So but getting back to the young fellow that asked this question, I've never really seen a utility in these reactionary laws. We've come a long way with the laws that we have, and now I'm referring to the United States and some parts of the Western world, although unfortunately governments seem to be encroaching on the ownership of guns more and more, and they seem to be primarily event-driven. And I think governments should be discouraged from reacting to what happens in a moment or in time. It might be an idea to wait 25 or 50 years before you pass all kinds of restrictive laws as a reaction to something that happens. Now, I understand that there's a natural inclination to say we have to do something right now because something bad happened. Well, yes and no. The bad thing has already happened. So by definition, you're assuming that a whole sequence of events is going to repeat itself and that your new law is going to be there to prevent the outcome. Yet the outcome is always unpredictable, and in the first place, any number of things that could have gone wrong and prevented the bad outcome or the tragedy or what have you. So I'm not sure if I held your attention through that whole logic, but it's definitely there. As far as the right to bear arms, well, this one's pretty clear to me, and it's not even my opinion. I studied this at university, and lots of other people did too. So there seems to be some kind of commonly held impression that because the Constitution says something, then it exists. So, for example, if a Constitution says you have the right to bear arms, you now have that right. But actually, that's an inaccuracy. We're all born with complete freedom. We're not subject to any laws. Governments create laws and other institutions create laws, but we're born free. And when we read in a constitution that we are now granted some right or freedom, it seems like we've been given something, but actually that's not really the case. It's not accurate. It may be reaffirming, and I think that's the way the United States Constitution is written. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert. I looked it over before filming, and I have a lot of people sending me lots of different stuff. But in terms of why it was written the way it was and so on, I just used simple logic and things. I think these were intelligent and learned people, and obviously the Constitution is a success because it not only got the United States to where it is, which I think, for all its faults, and there's no perfect country, it's kind of the standard, I would say, kind of the well of freedom, if you want to call it that, and that's not my own expression. But anyway, they probably saw that they've created the right to in a way bear freedom and the right to bear freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. And this all goes back to the Declaration of Independence. So they probably thought practically, well, we're highlighting all these things, all these rights, but what if somebody comes along and the people are not allowed to assemble? They're not allowed to choose their faith or what have you. So they thought, well, we better put something in there that the people have some kind of power on their own without a formal army from the government or defense forces. So I think that's the reference to the militia. And I think the Supreme Court wrote all kinds of interesting and long-winded rulings, but it's just essentially the people should have the power to defend the other aspects of the Constitution. So I think that's what the right to bear arms is all about. Other than that, people wrote me over time. I tried to take notes like I usually do. Reactive laws, we talked about that. Something bad happens and everybody's running around changing laws. Here was a very good point someone made. So we make these laws based on current technology, current guns, which is not easy, because then we're really making laws about, legal guns in the first place. And secondly, it's difficult to really make legislation that makes sense. We've all seen some very unusual laws, and there's always a way around them, and then those laws don't apply to illegal guns. So I don't know whether it's really realistic at all to try to pass laws that in many ways can't be enforced and encourage people who want to do bad things with guns to find guns some other way. So that's a logic that you've all heard before. Another factor to consider is the guns of today won't be the guns of tomorrow. There will be some other completely different guns that we can't even imagine, because technology always improves. These black guns that everybody's talking about now, they weren't prevalent 40 or 50 years ago. So I suppose we could have had an arena full of gun laws pertaining to the guns back then. But back then we were probably smart enough not to do that. And we would have had no way of knowing the black guns are arriving. So we'd be constantly writing and rewriting these gun laws when probably there's no point doing that. We should more think about the people. We should look to the people and why are things going wrong with people, not so much the tools that people use. So carrying on here, all kinds of comments about other countries. Something's going on in Sweden, something's going on in Norway. They're outlawing all kinds of classes of guns. Australia has all kinds of restrictive laws. Canada may have all kinds of restrictive laws. I mean, these laws really just affect law-abiding people, but we all know how unfair that is. So the origin of freedom, yeah, of course, the United States has the most freedom, I would say, arguably, and that's why it pays the highest price. But I think generally the people of the United States understand that and are not rushing to turn their country into some kind of a jail where there may not be as much random crime or other tragedy, but who, as the saying goes, who wants to live in a jail? And probably what I should do is, just in the interest of time, wind it up here, and maybe you'll probably have all kinds of comments and then we can revisit this whole thing again. But a couple of people wrote quite nicely that instead of rushing forward and having all these problems, maybe people should look backward to the values and faith or what have you that provided with us with a time that wasn't so clouded by tragedy and hardship and all these things which we don't understand. So anyhow, that's, as usual, a little disorganized, but that's hopefully covering the subject to some extent. And I look forward to your comments, especially the people that disagree, that think all the guns should be destroyed. That's another thing that people don't get straight. It's a good thing to have people disagree. That's just one of the first things you learn, is you never get angry at someone because they disagree with you. There are facts, and facts we don't have to argue about because they're facts, and everything else is an opinion, and we can discuss, and no one really knows which opinion is correct until it becomes a fact, and then we don't have to discuss anymore, presumably. So anyway, that's a broad-ranging sort of presentation. I hope I did it justice. And getting back to the original question, so yeah, I don't see any need for anything. We have different tools. There are all kinds of things that can cause harm. But trying to, be a hamster on a wheel, constantly changing laws and so on, just improve how we are as people, as a community, and we can carry on, as has been the case for hundreds of years, which is probably the strongest case I can make. We know how we got here, so why change course now? Anyhow, hope that makes some sense. Thanks for listening, and look forward to hearing from you all. Okay, bye-bye.